And we kick off our All-American Summer Concert Series with country star Mr. Phil Vassar. It's Fleet Week in New York City. Good morning, folks. You're watching Fox and Friends. So make your bed.
One dream, I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I ask the Lord every night, ooh, for just another day in paradise.
Breaking overnight, Republican Greg Gianforte dealing a blow to Democrats with a special election victory.
When you make a mistake, you have to own up to it.
It's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have the
Speak with Shane, please.
But you don't.
I should not have responded in the way that I did, and for that I'm sorry.
I don't think it's because a guy who's in office now has said very horrible things about reporters and has said that the reporters are the enemy of the American people.
There's so much hostility, frankly, to the press generated by the Donald Trump rallies.
Everyone wants to talk about President Trump, but let's discuss Tom Perez and his cussing crusade. I get tired of it. And you know what? Middle America, America in general, is tired of it as well.
NATO's new sheriff. President Trump tells allies to pay their fair share.
Over the last 8 years, the United States spent more in defense than all other NATO countries combined.
President Trump was exactly right. If they're going to be a part of a military alliance, they have to step up and invest in their defense.
The plague of leaks at U.S. agencies took a troubling new turn.
The people who leaked the British story were not in the White House. They were in the intelligence community, and they ought to go to jail.
Along with Keurig is our official sponsor of the All-American Summer Concert Series, which officially starts on this Friday during Fleet Week, the last Friday of spring, kind of.
Right.
Because kind of summer starts this week.
And Keurig, by the way, the only coffee where you cannot make a bad cup of coffee. It's very easy. Even I can do it.
You can get really strong coffee. I could get French vanilla.
All choices.
You can make cocoa. You can make tea.
Right.
We sound like a commercial.
They're almost bragging. Meanwhile, at 2 minutes after the hour, we got some breaking news. Overnight, Republican Congressman Greg Gianforte wins the Montana special election, filling Ryan Zinke's seat.
Thank you, Montana!
His victory coming just hours after being charged with body slamming a reporter.
Griff Jenkins joins us right now, live from our nation's capital, with the breaking details. Griff, in the closing week, it looked like they were 2 points apart, but then at the end, he won by 5 points, right?
He did. He actually won by almost 7 points. This is amazing. Montana has spoken, guys. If you stop for a moment and think about it, just 24 hours ago, we were talking about this tape.
I'm just curious if you have the
Speak with Shane, please.
But you don't.
I'm sick and tired of you guys. The last time that came in here, you did the same thing.
Gianforte was being charged with assault, but that body slamming incident was not enough to deter Montanans. Gianforte topping political newcomer and folk singer Rob Quist. You ask about those numbers, here they are. Gianforte 50.4%, Quist 43.9%. Gianforte began the celebration, though, first with an apology.
When you make a mistake, you have to own up to it. That's the Montana way. I'm not proud of what happened. I should not have responded in the way that I did, and for that I'm sorry. I should not have treated that reporter that way, and for that I'm sorry, Mr. Ben Jacobs.
Rob Quist ran on a Bernie Sanders-style platform, conceding the race at his evening last night, saying Montanans will hold Gianforte accountable. But Gianforte was driving home a message that neither Sanders nor Nancy Pelosi is calling the shots in Montana.
Tonight, Montanans are sending a wake-up call to Washington, D.C. establishment. Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi can't call the shots here in Montana.
As to questions of whether Gianforte would have trouble being seated because of the incident, House Speaker Paul Ryan says he will not stand in the way of letting Montana decide for themselves. Gianforte will have to face a court appearance by June 7th, and I guess he'll face a lot of pesky reporters as well, guys.
All right, Greg Jenkins, thanks.
The key to his win is the mail-in ballot, because 259,000 mail-in ballots were returned before that bad.
You know, traditionally, I know Montana is very red, but traditionally that usually goes to Democrats, right? The mail-in ballots.
Donald Trump won by 20.
Yeah, in there, but Ryan Zinke didn't. I think Ryan Zinke had a tough vote. I'm not sure, believe it or not, whether you like it or not, I'm not sure people didn't like the fact that he was standing up for himself and were bothered by the media in today's world, especially if you watch some other channels. Meanwhile, an example, you see this incident and you see a problem in Montana. Others see this incident and think it's got to be the president.
I don't think it's because a guy who's in office now has said very horrible things about reporters and has said that the reporters are the enemy of the American people.
No,
I think that has nothing to do with anything, that people feel that they can get away with it, because I don't believe that you actually believe that. There's no way you can't. There's no way you believe what you're saying if you don't think that's true.
There's so much hostility, frankly, to the press. A lot of it generated by, the Donald Trump rallies, frankly, and a lot of my colleagues faced the blowback from that. So this is kind of an extension of that.
You can draw a straight line from Republican candidates thinking that sort of behavior is okay when you have Donald Trump berating reporters throughout the entire campaign.
Okay, so what do you think? Well, we got some viewer comments.
All right, Robert Rodison said, why do people continue to think that Trump is the problem? The left keeps saying that the right are aggressors, yet the left continues to be the actual bullies.
Tom says, well, if the president is to blame for the Montana dispute, will the left take ownership of all the riots that have occurred in all the cities recently? Yeah, where are they condemning what's been taking place since President Trump became President Trump?
All right, meanwhile, joining us right now from down in North Carolina, we got former Secretary of Education under President Reagan and the drug czar for President George Herbert Walker Bush, Mr. Bill Bennett. Bill, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning, guys. So hey, Admiral McCraven and Steve, is there a family resemblance there?
I know, absolutely.
It is shocking.
Long lost cousin.
No kidding.
They both make their beds.
We do. Make your bed. Make your bed. So what do you make of what's going on out in Montana and all those people we just showed in that montage that are essentially saying that guy out in Montana was channeling Donald Trump?
Well, I know a little bit about moral theory. I wrote a book called The Book of Virtues. But I got to tell you, I'm astounded by the fact that it's blamed on Trump. So Trump, sort of Jedi-like from Europe, can levitate this reporter off the ground and slam him that it's Donald Trump's fault. It's not Donald Trump's fault. The reporter jumped in on the guy, came in on the guy a second time. As Gianforte said, it's the second time you've done it. Gianforte took ownership of this. He wasn't saying Donald Trump made me do it. By the way, I think it's over because he handled it so well at the victory party, saying he was sorry, apologized personally to the reporter. But let's remember, Montana is a physical culture. People deal with things a little differently than they do sometimes. You're not going to see this on the Asila very much, I'm going to tell you. But he handled it very, very well. Blaming Trump is, of course, what the Democrats want to do. May I just say, in terms of the issue of moral equivalence, is what Gianforte did worse than what John Edwards did, than what Bill Clinton did? How about Teddy Kennedy? Who drowned a woman and then ran for re-election. This is on the moral scale,
president.
Pretty trivial. And he ran for president. This is pretty trivial, and he apologized. That issue, I think, is over. But to blame it on Trump is crazy, just crazy.
You think he would have won if it weren't for the mail-in votes?
I'm not sure. I think he might have picked up some more votes with this. So I think, the displeasure with the press. And look, I've been in this situation. I remember carrying my older son, who was a little kid then, reporters in your face. I said, I need to get out of here. I need to get this child to someplace else, and they're just blocking your way. I know the temptation. It was wrong what he did. It's wrong what he did, but he apologized for it. That issue is over. But notice, the mainstream media is reacting more to this, more visceral reaction from the liberal media to this than to Manchester or to the other news you guys came out with this morning, which is the death of Christian Coptics. Are there any Christian Coptics left? How can there be any left?
It's unbelievable. But Bill, by the way, I interviewed you. I know you're a physical guy because you were a football player, and I talked to you about that. But I want to talk about what the president's going to do. When he comes home, the word is there's going to be some changes. And they're thinking about setting up, and in fact, it looks like they will, set up almost a war room to deal with the Russian attacks as well as their critics. How do you feel about that? Is that an overdoing of a situation?
No, it isn't. I learned one thing in Washington, and when I left Washington after, 8 or 9 years of service, they said, what'd you learn? I said, it's like football. You're on offense or you're on defense. And if you're not on offense, you're on defense. So they got to get more of their team. I do think they have good, strong people, but there aren't enough of them as there are in a lot of the departments. So they need to beef that up. They need to be preemptive, and they got to, as Newt was saying on your show, guys, got to get after these leakers. This is really terrible.
You're right.
And these leaks are coming from the intelligence community, not a loyal intelligence community, but from the intelligence community.
Bill, what was your response when the president had the conversation with NATO and said, you all need to pay your fair share? There are only 5 of us that are paying into this.
You had a pan of the NATO group there listening to the president. It was hilarious. I mean, they were just so upset, let's put it that way. You know, they're being lectured. Isn't it ironic, guys, that the president got a warmer welcome in the Middle East, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, than in Europe, the womb of America? He was telling a lot of these countries, you're deadbeats. You know, you're living off the wealth of the land and the wealth of the United States. I think it was exactly right. He talked about this during the campaign. He also, in doing this, is reminding them of what the mortal threat is. And the mortal threat to them is not Donald Trump. The mortal threat is ISIS. It is at their throats. ISIS is at war with them. I'm not sure they know that they should be at war with ISIS.
Right, but they have done a lot for us in Afghanistan and Iraq, and NATO did, and we appreciate the fact.
Just pay what you promised, right?
What?
Think about how much more they could do if we had more money.
All right, fine.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Hey, can I tell you? Yes. Can I tell you one quick McCraven story?
Yes.
When that book came out, when he gave that speech, I was on the radio, and I had a SEAL call up, and he said, I took that advice, but I got in trouble because the first thing I did was I made the bed, but my wife was still in the bed.
You know what? That's such an important thing. He forgot to put that in the book. Make sure the bed is empty when you're making it.
Right.
All right.
Right. Make sure no little kids are rolling around. Exactly right. Exactly right.
All right. Bill Bennett joining us from, I'm not going to say the island because he doesn't want a lot of people to know where he's
Stop
at.
it.
But it's beautiful
Stop
and it's
it.
in North Carolina.
I'm in the swamp. Just say I'm in the swamp. Okay.
Well, somebody's trying to drain it. Good news. All right. Thank you,
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, coming up straight ahead, a Civil War museum being shut down because it's offensive. Is history being erased before our eyes? We'll discuss it.
And Attorney General Jeff Sessions vowing to take the president's immigration order all the way to the Supreme Court. So what does that mean? Rob Schmidt is here to break it all down for us. Come on in, Rob.
Girl, sit your hallelujah, 'cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. 'Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. 'Cause Uptown Funk don't give it to you. Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch.
Breaking right now, reports of at least 23 people killed in Egypt after gunmen opened fire on a bus carrying Coptic Christians. This happened just south of Cairo. So far, no one's taken credit for the attack. Egypt under a state of emergency following 2 bombing attacks on Coptic churches on Palm Sunday. Dozens killed at the hands of ISIS. Also breaking, Las Vegas on high alert, warned the city could be ISIS's next target. Police alerting hotels and casinos about a credible threat after the terror group released a new video showing the Sin City Strip, encouraging attacks on soft targets. The FBI now working with intelligence agencies and international law enforcement as hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to Las Vegas this Memorial Day weekend. Ainsley?
President Trump's border order once again shot down by a federal appeals court, setting the stage for a Supreme Court showdown.
It's unbelievable. The White House slamming the ruling, saying judges are interfering with our commander-in-chief's national security powers.
What else is going on? Rob Schmidt joins us with what's happening next. Robert?
Hey, guys. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, the words that helped candidate Trump win the election now preventing President Trump from doing his job. The key issue here is the pause on travelers coming from Muslim-majority nations about religion or about national security. Well, the top judges in Richmond, Virginia, saying that it drips with religious intolerance, animus, and discrimination. This is the second appeals court to uphold a ruling against this order. One of the 3 judges dissenting, just 3 did, Paul Niemeyer, wrote, regrettably, at the end of the day, the real losers in this case are the millions of individual Americans whose security is threatened on a daily basis by those who seek to do us harm. The immigration order has been bouncing around the court system since late January when the president put it in place, fueling outrage and protests at airports. You remember that. It was quickly met with resistance by the courts and has sparked debate about just how politicized our judicial system is. This latest version, tweaked in an attempt to appease critics, is a 90-day travel pause on people from Iran, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, and Sudan. They left Iraq off this latest one. Attorney General Jeff Sessions now vowing to appeal this ruling to the Supreme Court. The administration wanting 90 days to buy itself time to put together a better vetting process for people coming into the United States. Trying to keep us safe is what they say their motive is.
Okay, so next stop, the Supreme Court.
According to Jeff Sessions, yeah.
All right. And I'd be very curious to see what General Kelly has to say about that, because it directly affects him.
And he will be with us in 10 minutes.
And then I'm going to interview him again at about 9:30 on the boat over there for Fleet Week. So
just like that. All right, we'll be watching.
A lot of time with him today, yeah.
All right, securing our border from the seas.
Thanks, guys.
All right, meanwhile, straight ahead, Ben Carson, the doctor, sparking liberal outrage over this comment. Listen.
I think poverty, to a large extent, is also a state of mind.
Poverty, a state of mind. Well, our next guest rose from poverty and says Ben Carson is absolutely right. Lawrence Jones weighs in next.
You are now rocking with Will I Am in Britney. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We've got a Fox News alert. The man known as the Houdini of Alabama's death row is put to death by lethal injection. 75-year-old Tommy Arthur, a convicted hitman, had been behind bars since 1982. He escaped execution 7 times in the past, but the U.S. Supreme Court just declined to give him an 8th postponement. And a potentially deadly attack on police thwarted at Phoenix's Comic-Con. Police taking down a suspect armed with guns and knives who they say intended to murder cops. The suspect allegedly snapping pictures of officers at the event, then posting them online with threatening messages. All right, Ainsley, Brian.
All right, thank you, Steve. New backlash this morning surrounding Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson for saying this.
I think poverty, to a large extent, is also a state of mind. You take somebody who has the right mindset, you can take everything from them and put them on the street, and I guarantee you, in a little while, they'll be right back up there.
Okay, let's bring in Lawrence Jones, host of The Blaze, for his reaction, who's got a tremendous personal story himself. And Ben Carson, Lawrence, is not coming at it from an elitist angle. He was born to a single-parent family where his mom was never home because she was working 2 or 3 jobs, and he ends up being a neurosurgeon, and his brother becomes a very successful lawyer. Is there anything wrong with what he said?
Well, good morning, family. You know, I sympathize with Ben because I know what he was saying. It's actually the same thing that my mom and dad told me. You know, my mom was 16 when she had me. My dad married her, and I got here today at 24 because of the teachings that my parents gave me, and that poverty mindset was one of them. You know, they always told me no handouts, and they always told me, son, there's a difference from being in poverty and having that mindset. For instance, they would make me mow lawns in my community to earn money because they didn't want me to just depend on them or to depend on the government. They would always say, don't take handouts.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, we teach our kids, if you want to be smarter, then read books and go to school. If you want to be wealthy, then hang out with, you know, do internships with wealthy people. Find out what they did to get to the top. So if you're poor, wouldn't you want to look to Dr. Ben Carson, who's a neurosurgeon, to say, how did you do it?
Most definitely, and Dr. Ben Carson has been very involved in his community. Before he became a Republican a candidate, he was respected by many in the community of Detroit. But this goes back to the facts. You know, if money was the answer to everything and not just the mindset, then 70% of people that win the lottery wouldn't go broke, or 78% of the athletes in the NFL wouldn't file for bankruptcy, because it really wasn't the mindset that was changed. It was just the money. So many people on the left believe that if you just throw these programs, that it will solve all the problems within my community or people that are in poverty. You have to really educate these people and really show them the way. And, you know, I'm a living witness. You know, you don't get here at the age of 24 from a mother that had you at 16 and your dad married her and lived in poverty for the majority of your life without hard work and changing that mindset.
And determination. Right. That's what he's saying. It's just
first, it's everywhere. It's constant. We've had 4 major terrorist attacks in a week in 4 different places, obviously Manchester, Egypt, Philippines, and Indonesia, by generally the same groups. It's nonstop. The good news is for us in America, we have amazing people protecting us every day. DHS, obviously, FBI. Fighting the away game is DOD, Department of Defense, CIA, NSA, working with these incredible allies we have in Europe and around the world. But it can happen almost here anytime. I was telling Steve on the way in here, if he knew what I know about terrorism, he'd never leave the house in the morning. Yeah. But the good news is, again, we're the finest men and women in uniform, out of uniform, police officers, local law enforcement, New York City cops protecting us.
Thank goodness. Thank you for what you do.
General, so when you're in uniform and they say go to Afghanistan and Iraq, it makes sense. You train for that. You know how to do it. You know how to organize. But now our uniform people are people who work for you, the cops, the detectives, every single day. They are. What is it like? They're almost transforming from the guy who writes your tickets and tells you to slow down to, excuse me, where are you from and what are you up to?
They again, are among the finest Americans. 45 and a half years in the Marine Corps, I worked with soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard nonstop. I never thought I'd ever meet another group of people like them, and now I'm in DHS, whether it's local, state officials, law enforcement rather, or my own people. Customs and Border Protection, ICE, Secret Service, people like that, just phenomenally good people, dedicated, work hard, and they're protecting us.
Since you got this job, you're talking a lot about the wall. The president talks about the wall all the time. We need it. We need a barrier in some places and flat out a wall in other places. The president, former president, took a shot at this president, I believe, in Germany yesterday.
There are disruptions in these countries. If there's conflict, if there's bad governance, if there's war, if there's poverty, in this new world that we live in, we can't isolate ourselves. We can't hide behind a wall.
Are we hiding behind a wall?
Not at all. We're not hiding behind a wall. We are constructing physical barrier backed up by technology and, of course, the great men and women of Customs and Border Protection to simply safeguard our southern border. It's not going to impede in any way the legal crossing of millions of people a week. Mexicans and all other nationalities, Americans going south and north, normal commercial traffic will move. But we're not hiding behind a wall. And you can't defend anything by hiding behind something.
You mentioned ICE agents a moment ago. There's Senator Ron Johnson, I think 2 days ago, mentioned that the Obama administration knowingly let in members of MS-13, that super violent gang from Central America.
Well, Steve, I don't know anything about that, but I can tell you as of the 20th of January, that would never happen. I don't know if it happened before, but it would never happen on my watch.
How? What's the big change?
Mr. Trump came in with a series of campaign promises, and he told me one day, and I didn't know him before I took this job, and he just said to me on the first day, you know what I want you to do on the border? I said, I got it, boss, and off I went. And so we are taking care of business on the border.
Is he letting, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Border crossings right now are down by 70%. 70% since January.
So do we need the wall if they're down by 70?
We definitely need the wall. We need a physical barrier in certain places and certainly technology in other places. But key to that reduction is there's almost no unaccompanied minors coming across the border, and that is kind of the recruiting pool for MS-13 and the other cartels.
You had a
Almost
tough
none.
line. You said, listen, if you come over here, you're getting sent back, and if you come in with your families, we're going to separate the families. And it said, wow, how could he say that? But the message is to the Central and South American countries, you got to stay where you're at, because it's not going to be, your path isn't paved with gold if you don't do it right.
You're right, Brian. And let me tell you, we work so closely with those great countries down there, to include Mexico. The relationship at my level couldn't be better. We collaborate on either side of that border. I'm traveling down to Central America. Of course, in my last job, I was down there all the time. So we're trying to make things right down there, because much of their problems, of course, are attributed to our drug demand in the United States. So we're working the whole thing: economic, diplomatic, social, law enforcement. Down 70% since Donald Trump took the reins.
I remember when you said that if you're an illegal here in America and you're caught with a DUI, you're going back. And I asked the president about that, and he said, I'm going to let the general do the job. This is because they say a good leader is one that can delegate, and I know that he's letting you make a lot of these rules.
75% of the people that the great men and women of ICE have taken into custody, 75% are criminals. The other 25% are not innocent. There are multiple deportees. There are people who have fleeing from the law. They're fugitives, but they're not necessarily convicted criminals. So 75% are indeed criminals. The other 25% are not the valedictorians of their high school class.
That's well
That's a nice way to say it.
All right. In addition to fighting terror, you are also the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and you're worried about all of us being safe during the summer, and including the hurricane season. Right. You got some tips for us.
Watch the news. We have already started, as you might imagine, the planning, working with the president, working with the White House. FEMA has got the lead on this. Working with the state and locals, working with the National Guard, getting ready for hurricane season that, of course, starts on the 1st of June. So we're ready to go.
Here you go. Some tips. Apply for a TSA pre-check. I've done that. It is fantastic.
We've all got that.
Tweet or message, ask TSA. Prepare for security. Follow the liquid rule and call TSA. Do your part. Don't just expect you to do it alone. Now, on Memorial Day, we do want to talk about somebody. I know you think about those who lost their lives in the line of battle, but for you, the highest-ranking officer to lose his son in this generation in the line of battle, what are you thinking about and your family thinking about this Memorial Day?
Well, the first thing I'd say is we don't need Memorial Day. If you're a Gold Star family member, you think about him or her every single day, in fact, hundreds of times a day. But what Memorial Day, in my mind, is good for is to remember, for America to remember the million men and women over our history, the million men and women who have given their life for this country in combat. So on Memorial Day, even if you're at the beach or taking advantage of some mattress sale somewhere, think about that.
Can you tell me about that? Can you tell me about the man who's split in the screen with you?
Second Lieutenant Robert Kelly.
He's the finest man I ever knew.
Why?
Just is. Yeah, finest guy. Wonderful guy. Wonderful husband, wonderful son, wonderful brother. Brave beyond all get out. His men still correspond with us. They still mourn him as we do.
Great comments about a great son from a great patriot. General, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so very much.
God bless you.
Semper Fidelis.
Yeah. We're going to talk to the president.
I think we're leaving.
About getting another day off.
Time to go.
All right, because you're working too hard.
Wisconsin is hoping to become the first state to require drug testing and screening for Medicaid applicants. But in order to do so, the state will need a waiver from the federal government, something that seems more plausible, perhaps, under President Trump than his predecessor. So is it a good idea? Here with his thoughts is former Wisconsin Governor Scott McCallum. He joins us today from Madison. Mr. McCallum, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So tell me why you think this is a good idea.
You know, Steve, this is a continuation of a number of the welfare reforms that we had earlier coming out of the state of Wisconsin, which led the nation and which was taken up bipartisan fashion federally. It's a good idea because we've got a shortage of finding the right type of people and getting people in a number of the jobs, so there are shortages of workers. At the same time, we have a number of people applying for Medicaid, people that need the health care support. So what we're trying to do is help people in the state of Wisconsin, help them get back to work, help them become employable and contributors to society again.
Okay, so if you want state benefits, you've got to prove that you're not hooked on drugs. I know that you say the state funds drug rehab, so the argument that this hurts addicts is wrong. Explain that.
Well, you're correct. You anticipated my response because people do. So there are some that can concern, why are we going to be able to do this? But in effect, the state is going to pay for rehabilitation. It is going to pay because it wants to get people back into the workplace. And many of the employers are saying we can't hire people. They've got drug addiction. They've got issues that won't allow them to work for us. So the state is saying, we're going to help. We're going to pay for these issues. We're going to rehab people. We're going to get them back into the workplace.
Okay, well, there is a critic among several, research director of the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families. He says this. It says that we're going to test people first as a condition of getting access to health care, which is backwards, he says. We need to get people into health care programs, build trust with their doctors, and then get them the treatment they need. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, when you go to an employer, you're never going to work unless you get tested. So you're going to get tested. Right. And in the state of Wisconsin, what we're going to say is you're going to be tested and you're not going to receive benefits unless you are going through these things, become eligible to work, to take those steps. And the state of Wisconsin is going to walk that walk with you. It's going to pay for the rehabilitation. It's going to pay for the training and the treatment. And it's a way of finding these out. And it's not going to pay for people unless they're taking the steps to help themselves.
Right. All right. Well, let's see what happens out in the great state of Wisconsin. Governor, thank you very much for joining us today from Madison.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
All right. So what do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Meanwhile, coming up, country star Phil